Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 32 of the Limitless TCG podcast, the podcast all about competitive Pokemon. I am your host, Connor Hayward, and joining me, as always, is my regular co-host, Robin Schultz. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, doing all good. I've been playing a lot of Pokemon the past few days with the new set. It's been pretty fun overall. So yeah,
It's always my favorite time of like new set because there's so many things to go and try, and it's always really exciting to get kind of play a load of stuff, play against a load of different new stuff. So it's been really fun. But as before we dive into our thoughts on decks and what we've enjoyed playing so far, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who supports us over on patreon.com/limitlesstcg. It is the best way to support the projects we do here at Limitless, like the podcast, the website, tournament stuff that we have done previously and might be doing more of. It's like the most direct way to support us. And for this podcast and ongoing now, also want to give a huge shout out to Cardmarket for supporting us. They are the largest online Pokemon, card thing in Europe. It's great. I don't think I can remember the last time I bought singles from anywhere other than Cardmarket at this point. And there will be a giveaway for some Cardmarket vouchers associated with this podcast this week. So when this podcast goes up, and by the time you're listening to this, there will be a tweet. And if you go and basically tag a friend who you think would enjoy the podcast in a comment to the tweet and retweet the podcast, we will enter both you and your friend with the chance to win some Cardmarket credit. So with that out of the way and all our announcements done, it's been a new set. What have you been playing, Robin? Where did you start?
I've actually been playing with basically every new deck. Yeah, I bought some codes and yeah, just traded for everything. Also had pretty good pulls from my locked packs, so yeah, I was able to get all the cards, and yeah, I've been like playing a few games with like all the possible decks and like lists, or at least I've been trying to, and well, so far nothing of the new decks has been like incredibly good, I felt like, but all of them have been like kind of good. So yeah, I'm really not sure what to play right now for the POG champs, but yeah, like a lot of good new cards and a lot of good new decks. No real amazing new decks, I would say, but yeah, definitely like at least 3 or 4 decks that will become meta. Yeah, like, so the first thing I tried was Vikavolt, which yeah, it's just it's pretty good overall. You just like item lock for a bit, then take a few KOs with a second attack. Like, yeah, I think deck is pretty good at winning prize trades. Just
Well,
can
it's so this is the deck I've probably played the most since that we had the new set, and it's good. And I think you nailed it. There's a lot of really good cards, but nothing's mind blowing right now, which is probably fine. But it's strong, but also kind of sometimes struggles with closing out games. Like, it can win the prize trade, it can beat decks by locking them out the game, but I've also found that it just sometimes just runs out of steam. Of you're going, okay, I gotta, if I break the lock, I have to KO into KO, and you've used too many electro powers early, and you lose. And it's just like, well, this sucks.
yeah, I feel like a lot of games end up with you having to chase Crowbats or Lidena
Yeah.
to win the prize trade, which is fine, but yeah, it doesn't work out all the time. And also, what's problematic, like my biggest problem with the deck has been just Eternatus. If it, like, Eternatus can pretty reasonably get a turn to KO in Vikavolt, and it's pretty hard to recover from that. It's like sometimes the item lock really hurts them, and you're fine, but other it's just so hard to deal with that.
Well, a lot of the
this has been kind of the hardest matchup so far for the deck.
Well, a lot of the VMAX decks have like built-in Pokemon support effectively, where they kind of set themselves up without really needing that much. Like Eternatus doesn't need that much between having like as soon as it gets the VMAX down and it can just Crobat its way through its deck, it doesn't care, and you might not always draw that many cards from the Crobat if you can't use your items, but once you're set up, you don't really care because the pressure back from Vikavolt's not great. Same with Center Scorch. Like if they once they get 2 energies onto a VMAX, it kind of snowballs itself quite quickly, and it naturally sets itself up for like a big Volcanion KO or like a Heatran KO, and they play the Volcanion, which means it doesn't get disrupted that much by the item lock. So like the big VMAX decks, and also ADP because it's basically a VMAX with how much HP that thing has. Actually kind of hard to deal with because your damage output's never really scaring them, and they don't need that much item support to get going if they, if they have their one turn. Like you have to kind of get the lock immediately. Like outside of it beats all the single prize decks, which I like. My favorite thing right now is if you queue Vikavolt into Baby Browns and you just go, but how are you getting all your energy back? You just never let them get their energy back. You're like, cool, you've KO'd 2 Vikavolt. You're out of energy. You lose. That's kind of fun, but
yeah, like Vikavolt is good. Yeah, it's good against stuff like Bacephalon, and yeah, against the bigger decks, it really depends on how your early game goes. If you get KO'd immediately, you usually lose. But if you can like stall for a few turns, maybe KO something like a Jirachi or I don't know, Zigzagoon, something small, then like then if you don't fall too far behind while you KO a free prizer, you can usually just clean up the game with a boss on a Crobat and win. But sometimes you just fall behind too much, and then you can't do that, and you lose the prize rate before you're able to do that. So yeah, it hasn't been the most reliable deck against other against bigger stuff. So not sure if I like it too much, but it's I think it's still one of better decks right now. I would probably put it in tier 1. It has been pretty good overall, but yeah, it can struggle with just getting overrun by things like Eternatus.
Well, it's one of those tier 1 decks which isn't isn't like super polarized. Like it's not like it's a 70-30 against basically anything. Like okay, it kind of is against Baby Browns, but against the rest of the field, it's kind of a solidly 50-50 deck, which is still a good bring to a tournament because you're not taking any auto loss. Like you're not really going to have many auto losses, or you're almost always in games, which for best of 1, which POG Day 1 is kind of nice, right? Like you're not going to just see people flip over cards and go, oh dear. But it's not like an insane deck where you can take those auto wins when you get the chance. Like you're always having to fight for it.
Yeah, the deck has a pretty even matchup split overall. I would agree.
But the other deck that I think has had a lot of hype from the set was Eternatus. Probably the most talked about like deck. Well, it's probably because there's only a couple of actually new decks out of the set, but it's by far and away the most talked about deck was Eternatus with its kind of Mega Ray style. It's Mega Ray and Skyfield in the one card effectively, which I haven't had a chance to play yet because I haven't got all the cards. But I've played against it a few times, and it seems pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as the hype. Maybe.
Yeah, I've played with the deck, and I haven't found a list I really like yet. So I guess the deck has been performing kind of average so far. It's really good against 2-price Pokemon like Vikavolt. Vikavolt has been pretty much the best matchup for it in my testing so far. But when playing against bigger decks, like other VMAX, for example, Center Scorch, I've been kind of struggling because in those matchups, Eternatus doesn't really do anything special. Like 270 is not enough to reach something like a Center Scorch VMAX. And yeah, it's also like not incredibly consistent. Like getting the reaching even tag teams can sometimes be hard. I would say Pikarom and ADPZ are fine matchups, probably slightly favored at least, but it's still pretty easy to lose. Sometimes you just end up doing 210 damage against the Pikarom or like 180. And suddenly you're in a bad position. And same against ADP. If you don't get the 280 knockout against the ADP immediately, which can happen quite easily, you just kind of lose against that deck. And that's scary. And in addition to that, Eternatus is just naturally not good against single prizes. It doesn't have great outs against Blacephalon, even though I think it can win because Blacephalon needs a lot to KO it, but it should be able to. Blacephalon has been keeping up kind of fine with Dragapult, and Eternatus is just so much easier for it to deal with than Dragapult was. So yeah, that matchup against single prizes. Yeah, like Blacephalon, and there's also others like Mad Party is, I think, also not easy for Eternatus, and other small decks like Nil decks, for example. It's like Eternatus is really good against two prizes and against things that it can one hit KO, but against single prizes it does like way too much and it's just not really efficient. And against VMAX Pokemon it does too little and is not really efficient at it. So yeah, like the deck is obviously still good, but it's not like incredibly dominant. It's not the absolute best deck, I don't think. It's just a good deck, and yeah, not more than that, I think.
So it's one of those decks which I think is going to take the most time to refine a list compared to some of the others, because as soon as you have these decks which do more damage based on number of Pokemon, you have to choose the correct support Pokemon lineups and stuff, and that's a lot less straightforward than just choosing the kind of, oh, let's slap in some electro powers, maybe the Raichu, a Alolan Raichu tag team, and things like that. You know, like it's not a straightforward deck to build because you're like, okay, well, probably Zigzagoon, that's an obvious choice. Hoopers, Spiritombs, like what other attackers are we including? Because there's actually a lot of really good support Dark Pokemon right now. So from that perspective, I think it's a tricky deck. It's a much more difficult deck to construct properly, which means that I don't think it's something that will be fully realized in terms of like best build until a couple of weeks. It's going to take, just because it takes time to work out, okay, well, what do I want to beat in this format? Like, should I be including which Hooper do I want to, do I play a split of Hooper? Do I want to go heavy on one side, heavy on the other side for the Hoopers? What do I want to play Spiritomb as my non-V or my single prize attacker? If I'm playing Zigzagoons, how does it fix the maths? Do I want to play something a bit more tanking? There's a lot of questions that you can ask with it that I don't think other decks have to deal with. And I think that's actually very difficult compared to I'll play Welder and attach 2 Fire Energy to my Center Scorch VMAX and smack them.
Well, I felt like the Pokemon selection in the deck doesn't really matter that much because you usually have to attach to your Eternatus anyway, because you don't have energy acceleration. You have to threaten the big damage against most decks, and so the other Pokemon are kind of just you put them down and you don't really do much with them ever. Like you have a few choices, of course. Like you could play the very Zigzagoon heavy build with Scoop Up Nets as well, which yeah, that one has the advantage that it can reach chaos a little bit easier, so it's a little less likely you whiff a KO on something just because you don't have enough Pokemon, or just because your Pokemon do some extra damage. And it can also play the Evital GX, which gives you a 1-hit KO option against other VMAX. But I think that's pretty hard to pull off. I don't think the Zigzagoon Evital plan against other VMAX decks is really good, but it's something that yeah, that can work sometimes. Yeah.
Well,
but yeah, other than that, you can play Weavile, which gives you some more options, but it doesn't matter that much in most games as well. Like you can play a bunch of Pokemon that maybe give you some better outs in some matchups. Like if you go very heavy on your single price attackers, you have a better chance against the Decidueye than like maybe other builds which might just take an auto loss against that. But overall, in most matchups, it doesn't really matter which other dark Pokemon you play. You just have to have enough to do enough damage with Eternatus.
Yeah, and I think that is also interesting, right? Because it's like, well, they just have to be the dark types to sit on the bench. I don't really care. Which means then are you basically playing a deck that requires too many dead cards for it to ever be consistent / there's all sorts going on. They're like, well, okay, if I have to play effectively 10 dead cards, like 4 dead cards because the 4 other attackers are useless in most matchups, well, now you're playing a 56 card deck against people playing 60 card decks, and that's not so fun. So I don't know. I think that might be something to keep an eye on going forward with Eternatus. Like, I like the idea. I really enjoyed Mega Ray because it was really fun, but that's because Shaman was a dumb card, because you just used to go crazy with Shamans in a single turn and just pop off pretty quickly. Not as much with Eternatus. It's not as turbo as people would kind of assume it to be, since you only have the 1 Crobat per turn sort of thing. So I am interested to see how that's going to do. I actually still don't know if it's going to be particularly widely played in POG this weekend, because I don't know how many people are going to be able to get their hands on all the cards for it. Like, I imagine there will be a good chunk of people probably playing it, but not maybe as many as the hype would lead people to think. I think we're going to see more of the other VMAX options from the set, particularly Center Scorch, because people like their Welder decks, and this is a Welder deck that doesn't really need Welder, because if they get the turn 2 Volcanion, they don't care anymore. And whilst the Welder's nice, the fact that it can attach to itself from discard every time it attacks kind of lets it snowball slightly naturally. Again, I this is probably next on my list for things I would like to test, but I haven't got around to it quite yet, because it seems pretty consistent. It seems to be something that you can build in a fairly tanky manner. Like, I've seen lists that are playing like a fair chunk of healing, actually, which is good. Like, it's an interesting deck. Still kind of plays more fireboxy, because you can play things like the Volcanion, and you can play your Heatran for the GX attack, which is super good. So it's actually pretty strong. And I've seen quite a bit of it on ladder, which makes me think it's, I think it could be quite widely played this weekend.
Yeah, I think Center Scorch is good. Yeah, you don't really need the Welder all the time, and even without Volcanion, you can just manually attach twice to the Center Scorch, and when you already do 120, get the energy back, and if you attach 1 energy next turn, you're already doing 200. So without a single Welder, you can 2-hit KO any VMAX, which is not Eternatus. And against Eternatus, you just hope to hit a Welder or something. It's it's not that hard. So the Center Scorch has been pretty good in my testing so far. It's been I think probably performing the best of all the new decks. Like not by much, but yeah, it feels like it has been like overall doing the best. And yeah, it's just overall really solid card. It can 2-hit KO everything without too much invest. You literally just head. And against smaller things, you can usually like 1-hit KO them at some point. And it also helps that you have tap advantage over Zacian, which is like the biggest 2-price Pokemon. So yeah, you kind of can 1-hit KO 2-price Pokemon rather easily. You can 2-hit KO everything else. You of course 1-hit KO smaller things without having to like really invest anything into your Center Scorch. And you can play Cephalon GX or Heatran for like even like for some for 1-hit KO against VMAX Pokemon. Like with those you can 1-hit KO them easier than with Center Scorch itself. Center Scorch is you need like 7 energy to 1-hit KO Dragapult or like another Center Scorch. It's like, and with Heatran you can get the energy from all from your whole board, and so you don't have to have everything on one Center Scorch, which makes it a bit easier to reach those 1-hit KOs. So the deck can just overall, it's pretty efficient at what it does, and it also has some good comeback options because you can play the Wondrous Labyrinth, which is a really good card, especially if you do a stamp play as well. And you have 3-price Pokemon, you have 2-price Pokemon, you have even single prizes. So it has a good mix of attackers. You can usually use your stamp, and because you naturally play like at least 1 or 2 Volcanion, you have outs against the Decidueye, which it's annoying to take a loss to the Decidueye. And also because of a Volcanion, you don't really mind going second, and because you're a VMAX Pokemon, you don't mind going first. So there's honestly a lot to like about the deck. Like it's not incredibly powerful in like anything it does, but it has a lot of outs. It's pretty efficient. Yeah, it's overall a really solid deck, and I've been liking it so far.
Yeah, well, it's so I'm not a huge fan. I haven't really ever played much Firebox or the welder decks in that kind of way, because I just the previous versions have felt a little bit, if you don't hit your welder, you're kind of not playing the game. So, but I am looking forward to trying some Center Scorch out. I might play some tomorrow actually. It feels different enough, and it feels like it's got like more options available to just welder every turn and take KOs. Like it seems quite like an interesting deck. And there's also like there's little things that like it's not an insane set of cards, but like the fact that the Center Scorch V has the attack for 1 energy to discard an energy from your opponent is kind of relevant occasionally, and like it means that if you're in awful situations, it's still not like if that's what you have to go with turn 1, it's not the end of the world. It's not particularly good for you, but it could be worse. Like at least it's relevant. And I think that's something that having all parts of the card and all parts of the deck be kind of relevant in some way, shape, or form outside of purpose number 1 is really good, because it just makes the deck flexible and fairly well rounded.
Yeah, I've definitely used that attack before.
Yeah.
Like only thing I don't really like about the deck is that it can be kind of hard to find the Center Scorch VMAX. You have to play Pokemon Communication, which is not that great. And as a welder deck, you don't have that much draw. You still play like 1 or 2 research probably, but you can't really play them too much because you don't need to play welder every turn, but you would still like to. It only draws 3 cards. Sometimes you just don't really draw into your Center Scorch VMAX. Or like even finding the Center Scorch itself with a little one can be it's much harder to just consistently set up than with something like Dragapult, which has treasures, which make like treasure is so good. and you can play a real draw supporter every turn. So it's much harder to just get that initial setup going with Center Scorch, but then again, it's not that hard, and usually you're doing fine. But yeah, it's a bit less consistent than something like Dragapult, for example.
Mm-hmm. So that basically rounds out the big three that we got from this set. The three that we expect to be doing pretty well. I've seen a few other bits and pieces of some things from this new set. So there's been like some Mad Party. There's a lot of that on YouTube because people think it's good. Annoyingly, I've seen actually quite a few games where I've gone, I don't hate this as much as I thought I would. In terms of actually, like, it seems to work better than I thought. Like, it actually has an okay Vikavolt matchup from what I've seen, because the fact that you can use the teapot, I can't remember its name, to draw cards is actually kind of insane, because it just lets you kind of go, I don't care about the lock. I'm just gonna step and try and one hit KO you anyway. So it's been an interesting deck to see, but I don't think it's necessarily the play for POG. I haven't seen any Decidueye yet. I don't think I've run into a single Decidueye online.
I actually played a back against a few already, and yeah, I faced the Decidueye in the Sunday Open, and I also faced the Decidueye in the tournament I played in today. So yeah, I've seen a decent amount of it, and it's kind of annoying to deal with for a lot of decks. I think it's a fine deck. It has a bunch of good matchups, but I personally wouldn't play it because sometimes you just can't really beat. Like, if you play against ADPZ Duraludon, I don't know, you probably just lose. And against Blacephalon, it's really difficult. Against Mildex, it's really difficult. Your bad matchups are like really, really bad. Like they aren't even close, and I really don't like that.
Well, yeah, it's polarizing, right? It wants to try and go, well, I'll beat a load of decks 70-30, but I'll lose to a load of different decks 70-30. So it's like, well, is that the risk you want to take, or do you want to take something that's kind of fairly uniform across the board, like the other decks feel like they are at the minute? But already kind of mentioned, those are the new decks, right? But there's been not so much updates in a lot of cases to old decks, but there's a lot of old decks that are still good. One of them being Mill. I think Mill's going to see a lot of play this weekend. It is the last time you are basically able to play Mill, because there's going to be both Oranguru rotating, but also Bedabur and Bryceman being banned away means, you're going to have to you can't really do Mill plans if you can't discard 3 to 6 cards off the top of your opponent's deck every turn, sort of thing. So I think Mill's good. It's also in a really weird spot right now, again, because it basically hasn't really changed much, but there's a lot of decks that just can't really deal with it still. Pokedolls and Millum.
I think it's in a better place than it was last format, because there's gonna be a bit less Dragapult, probably, just because there's more decks, and also it gains a bad matchup with Eternatus. So yeah, like Dragapult has been kind of gatekeeping those mill decks last format, but now there's gonna be less Dragapult, and the mill decks benefit from that. And the new decks that we've been talking about, they aren't amazing against mill themselves.
Vikavolt's not too bad, but
Vikavolt is that might be a problem for those decks, but they might be like attacking against it with stuff like Chandler or something. Who knows? I don't know. There's a lot of different things you can do with mill or control decks, like with just Oranguru, Belba stuff in general. Not sure. Like some of them can probably deal with Vikavolt, and some of them can't. I have no idea how I would play a Belba deck right now, because I'm not intending to do that, so I haven't really thought about it. But they are, I think, in an okay spot. Have some some really good matchups, some close matchups, and then some decks that they lose against. But there's so many decks that you can probably take a loss and still be fine, unless you get really unlucky with the pairings. But yeah,
I mean, it's, for day one,
can
it's
always
10
happen.
rounds, best of one. So it could happen to any deck that you wind up queuing into 10 terrible matchups in a row. It's unlikely with certain decks, but it's a risk you got to take. And there's a lot of people who really enjoy playing Mill that I think will probably use this opportunity to play it for the last chance they get. Like this is the last shot of playing Mill. So it probably will see some play.
Yeah.
The other deck, well, it's also like the Bellerbrum Broken Man. It also has like its fringe second effect is kind of nice against exactly Eternatus, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, we might see maybe like attacked as a one-off in some Pikarom lists or something.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's good at countering Eternatus. It can be situationally very useful, but it's very, very situational.
It's also a pretty good mill tech. Like if you want to tech against Mill, throwing in a single Bellerbrum Bryson Man can be enough because if they end up low enough in their deck that you can mill them out with it, it's kind of satisfying, but not terribly likely.
Yeah, any deck with a tech call engine might be able to just put in one, and then it can help against Eternatus, it can help against Mill, so it's probably not the worst tech.
Yeah. But something that I have seen a lot of on ladder, and is actually one of the reasons why, as much as I'm enjoying the beginning of the new set and having all these new decks to play against, I haven't been playing as much as I thought I would, is because there is a lot of ADPZ. The deck is still good. I am bored of it being good already. But it's not combo, but it's kind of everywhere. It's still really strong. Turns out doing 260 and taking 3 prize cards with Zacian, pretty good. And gained Turbo Patch, which is kind of nice for it.
Yeah, not sure if I would play Turbo Patch in the deck, but yeah, it got a bit better. I feel like it can kind of deal with all the new decks. And what's nice about ADPZ is that it doesn't really mind going first or second. Like a lot of decks don't really want to go first, but also like don't really want to go second. It's very weird with going first or second. ADPZ is just kind of I don't care at all. If I go first, yeah, I attach. That's nice. If I go second, I just get lucky and hit the terminator creation, and I probably win. It's yeah.
Yeah,
the deck is just very good overall. Very well-rounded deck. It doesn't really have any really bad matchups. So yeah, it's been played a lot, and yeah, I expect to see it a lot in this tournament.
Yeah, so with ADP, I honestly feel that it's a little weird because we have it. It's kind of a perfect storm with ADP. I feel of ADP is obviously a strong card because it shortens games. Like the GX attack, fundamentally, its purpose is to shorten the game down. Take an extra prize card with each KO.
Well, not necessarily. It's like you kind of give up your early game for a stronger late game to like come back from there. But like the way it works right now, you can if you can turn one Ultimate Creation, that's yeah, and then maybe Ultimate Ray Crobat or something. That's not really the intended purpose, I guess.
Yeah. But then on top of that, they also got rid of the fairy type, which meant they're never going to print an attacker that actually one hit KOs an ADP easily because you haven't got the weakness. So the ADP side basically takes care of itself, right? It doesn't need any, it's hard for it to have a weakness. And then you pair it with a good attacker. Zacian is a clearly strong attacking option because it has the same energy typing, or part of the same energy typing, does a lot of damage, can be set up with a single ultimate ray, and it feels like it's a case of, okay, this may have been a mistake putting all of this out so soon after each other in such a way. Like, it does feel that it's not going to go anywhere. Like, how do you print cards that actually beat the deck without being ridiculously insane cards that beat everything in their own right? It just feels that I question the design decisions.
Well, VMAX are kind of like are not bad against ADPZ in general, because the damage buff doesn't matter. They can usually 1 KO Zacians quite easily, and some of them can even 1 KO on ADP, like Eternatus, for example. So what ADPZ really likes is just like not carrying at VMAX and just KOing D-Dennis, KOing Crobats.
Yep.
And there's a lot of both in the format, so ADPZ really benefits from that. Like, Crobats release really helps the deck, because it can just go fast itself, and it has more targets for ADP. Because if Ultimate Ray doesn't have a good target, then the deck is not that good. Then you kind of gave up 3 turns to do not that much. But if Ultimate Ray can KO something for 3 prizes, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think in the long run, it's not necessarily like format defining. Like last format we saw Dragapult, it was able to deal with it just fine. It was still a close matchup, of course, but with Dragapult, you didn't really have to put down any support Pokemon, and you could also scoop up net your little Pokemon. So if you just build up a board with only 2 Dragapult VMAX, then the ADP Jigs attack literally did nothing. The damage didn't matter, and the extra price didn't matter. So VMAX are a kind of a good ADP counter, but the way they work right now with our support Pokemon is not really how you beat ADP. So yeah, I think the deck overall, it's just like it's kind of annoying because it's so overplayed, but I don't think it's actually overpowered. It's just another good deck, and we have a lot of good decks right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating when you want to go play some new stuff on the ladder, and you just queue into 3 ADPZ in a row. You're like, okay, but I've been doing this since it came out, and I'm kind of fed up of this now. Like, can we have some new decks, please? And like, there's nothing wrong with it having a good deck stick around, but when it gets to the point where I'm like, yeah, but I can't play a Dedenne or a Crobat basically ever because I lose against it, and that's not as fun.
Yeah, it would be nice if we had something like that hits for weakness. That's really kind of unfortunate that Fairy rotated out.
Yeah, exactly. They were just like, okay, well, we're going to print a card that's weak to Fairy, and which is clearly going to be strong. Like, there's no way when designing ADP, you don't look at that card and go, this is not going to be good. If you honestly read ADP and think it's not good, I have questions for the person. But
I think at the beginning it wasn't even that good, and I think ADP is a very interesting and cool design. It's it's really good with Zacian though, and Zacian is I don't know, might make it a bit too dominant, but yeah, I think it's going to be fine. Like right now, people just play it a lot because they have it already. It doesn't really have bad matchups. It can deal with most things. Like, yeah, it's annoying to get hit with a turn on Alter Creation. I really don't like that. But if they don't do that, I'm fine with playing against ADPZ.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, if the intention of the design was you give up early game to be much stronger in the mid to late game, but you get it turn 1, is that giving up your early game? I don't know if it is. I think that's just having it all. I mean, that sometimes is a bit much.
And like with Saucers and Intrepid Sword, but giving up the energy also doesn't matter that much anymore. And with energy switches, you can just move them away. Then, like the current ADPZ builds are, I think really, really good at what they're doing.
Well, so there's also right now at least, and the reason why it's a good bring is that we've had 6 months of playing the deck. The lists are refined. Like, not much changes with how you build the list to this set. Like, there's maybe a Crobat instead of a Dedenne, or like little things like that.
There's still a lot of different lists. Some play Jirachi and Hair Call Engine, others play Order Pad, others just don't play Order Pad but still go Jirachi less. And there's decent amount of variety, but
yeah,
I think most people agree that you just play a lot of energy switches and hope for the best.
It's just if you're on refined lists, like even if there are different kinds of lists, they're all fail. Like there are like go-to Jirachi builds, there are go-to tag call builds, sort of thing. In a format right now, at least, where that's not true for Eternatus, it's not true for Center Scorch. Like there's been a lot of time for people to hone in on what kind of ADPZ list they want to play and how to build it, which is obviously going to make it stronger, right? Like it's a strong deck that has been polished versus these slightly unrefined lists that we'll be seeing of other things right now. So it's a good bring for the weekend.
And I think the same can be said to basically all the other really good decks we had before. Like there's not only ADPZ, there's also Pikarom and there's also Dragapult, which I think those two decks were better than ADPZ last format. And this format, I'm not sure if they are still better than ADPZ, especially in Dragapult's case, because it pretty much it struggles with Eternatus. Which is it's not the biggest problem because, like I said, you can take a loss, but it's annoying for Dragapult. But yeah, Pikarom and Dragapult are both still really good. Like ADPZ, I think they will be played, they will be successful. Just those are actually like really amazing decks. I think like playing those, it feels better than playing I don't know, the new decks, but it might also just be lists being better for me. Like I said, I really haven't found an Eternatus list I'm really happy with, while for Dragapult and Pikarom, lists at this point are pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that's a big advantage to playing these slightly older decks. Like you might not get to play with the shiny new toys, but the toys you've got are well tested and pretty well built at this point. So there's also, when we consider that this is an online event, we've got people from all over the world playing. We've got people from all and because it's like a world style event, we're gonna have the day 2 lot. So I know you're in day 2, right? And there's basically those who would have made Worlds Day 2. Well, these guys are going to be playing really good decks. They're good players. They're probably going to have very good lists. But they're also the kind of people who are probably more willing to go and trade for a boatload of cards and go get codes and kind of make sure that they can play all the stuff they want to play. You might have people who can only get one deck online. And so there's going to be a range of stuff throughout the tournament anyway. So it's kind of fine.
There's so many good decks, and I myself, I'm not really sure what I'm gonna play. Still a lot of options, and there's good arguments that can be made for a lot of decks. So while some decks might be more popular than others, like ADPC is probably gonna make up a decent amount of the meta game, but I don't think it will be anything close to how dominant it was 6 months ago. It's still just one of many decks that you will face.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. Like we're probably at about maybe 7 or 8 decks right now that I could honestly, with a straight face, recommend or consider playing, which is probably the highest it's been in a long time. Like there's enough decks right now that you could. You got ADP, you got Pika, you've got. I probably wouldn't recommend Dragapult right now, even though I really like playing it. Even though it's good, I just don't like it. The Eternatus matchup scares me. Then you have Eternatus, Center Scorch, Vikavolt. And then you've got your Baby Blounds. It's still good. I just don't kind of hate. I kind of hate Vika, but yeah.
Mill. Cephalon, it's really good against a lot of decks. It struggles with Vikavolt, but it's like the same with Dragapult. You take the loss to Eternatus. With Cephalon, you take the loss to Vikavolt. most decks take a loss somewhere.
Yep.
But yeah, there's like 8 decks that are really good.
Yeah.
Might be more, might be slightly less. I don't know. But there's still I don't know. There's Spiritomb, for example. It has been really good last format, and it should still be fine this format. I don't really see why not.
I mean, it actually got some cool new toys. Like, it got some new cards. It got so now you play the Cape and the new Stadium to help put damage counters down, so you can kind of build up your tombs and you can get to higher numbers and stuff using the toughness capes. So it can keep up. So could still be good. Like there's actually it's a wide open format. Like there's a lot of space for good decks right now.
And yeah, there's like the mill decks, the TCGO decks, like those are like not up there with the best decks, I would say, but they are still a thing, and there's something you can face. So there's so many different decks you have to kind of worry about, or yeah, I think it's fine to take one loss somewhere. Well, unless you're playing, I don't know, ADPZ with techs, you will not have a chance against everything, probably.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool that like that's kind of where it's at, because it means like the stream this weekend should be good. It should be possible to get a fairly wide variety of decks on the stream. I don't know for sure because I don't actually know. I've got my list of players that I need to talk to about getting them on stream, but I don't know what they're playing yet, so I need to hopefully make sure I don't get everyone playing the same deck. But there should be plenty of like different things to watch. But then there'll be a lot of different matchups throughout the tournament. I'm looking forward to seeing the meta breakdown for day 1 and then day 2, because they will be different. You can change decks between days. So it'll be an interesting event. And there's also the Players' Cup coming up, right? Like the finals for the Players' Cup is soon. So I think that's going to be like a very similar like wide open format of anything could happen. So it'll be interesting up until rotation, and then it'll get interesting all over again when rotation happens and some decks are still good and some decks are less good.
Yeah, I think pre-rotation it looks way more interesting than post-rotation right now, because a lot of cards rotate that just make some decks like clearly worse, like Electro Power for Lightning decks, for example. And I think we will end up with maybe not that many decks post-rotation, but I haven't really thought about it too much. But yeah, the pre-rotation format, it looks like it has been fun playing so far. And there's a lot of variety in decks. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a cool format, and I'm happy we have this big tournament in this format. Like this is the time of the year where you always have the biggest card pool, and I think it's kind of annoying that we just get the rotation right away without being able to play with it.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's cool to have this tournament with this really, really big card pool.
I mean, the having the largest card pool should mean you have the largest number of good decks, because there are just physically the most cards in the pool. Like, you should be able to make the most broken stuff, but also the power level should be at its highest, because there are more cards to choose from, so you can choose stronger cards in every position, like every situation, sort of thing. So it feels like it should be a really big format in terms of there should be a lot of fun stuff happening, even if we only get it for a little bit. But
yeah, it would be nice to have seen it evolve as well. But
yeah,
but rotation is there for a reason. Yes.
Yep, exactly.
Though it's gonna be fine, probably.
Though there was something about the next Japanese set having more lightning support in it, which is good, because a load of the really good lightning support is rotating out. So it's like, good, we can still play the yellow cards. So that's kind of nice. Well, it's more support for Vikavolt is the thing I'm really hoping for. But yeah, this is kind of a fun, like, short format. I don't know if it's necessarily something that I'd want to play. I don't know. Maybe having more tournaments in this format would be cool. I don't know.
I don't have a strong opinion on this format. I've only been playing it for like 4 days or something. But yeah, I've been liking it so far.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. So, I think that more or less wraps up our chat about how we think the format's going. Do you have any shout-outs?
I don't know.
You seem good. Shout out to however you got all your stuff for Eternatus, because dang, that's a lot of cards.
So, shout out to
oh, you got your Limitless merch as well now.
Yes.
So yeah, my shout out is actually to our sponsor for today's thing, because we have the giveaway. So I mentioned it at the beginning, I'll mention it again now. When this episode is up on Spotify normally publishes first. So whenever it's up, I will put a tweet out. Find the tweet. It'll be on, I guess we should do it from the Limitless account because that makes more sense. But tag a friend in a reply to the tweet and retweet the link that we'll put out. And both of you will be in with a shot of winning, I think it was €8. There's some amount of money on a code that the codes that I have. I can't remember the exact amount because I was given 2 sets. So Cardmarket credit, which can be used to get physical cards or right now code cards should you want them. So keep an eye out for that. So that'll be a nice little giveaway that we can do thanks to Cardmarket. So with that, and I think that is everything. Thank you very much for listening. And we will be back next week with probably the results of the POG tournament. So we'll speak to you then.